CME HQ with the final litany of breaking news on this Friday, the last trading day of the week. Let's start out with our March read on retail sales. We're expecting down 0.5%, and this is the advanced look, so it will change. Down 1%, much less than expected. The last time we were down 1%, well, that is the weakest month over month since down 1.1 in November of last year. And if you strip out autos, down 0.8%, double what we were expecting. We're expecting down 0.4, down 0.8 is the weakest. Well, you have to go way back a bit. You have to go down to the last month of 21, Dece of 21, ex autos and gas down 0.3, also a bit better than expected. Actually, we're expecting down 0.6. And finally, let's complete the 4 negative signs in front of the advanced retail sales. The control group, which gets pinned into other higher up the food chain economic releases, that's down 0.3%. Import prices for March down 0.6 month over month. If you strip out petroleum, still down 0.6. Export prices, well, you know what? Why don't we do import price year over year? Year over year looks are good, and this one is a whopper. Minus 4.6%. Minus 4.6%. If we look at export prices, now shift gears month over month, down 0.3, year over year down 4.8. So pretty much everything I've said today had a minus sign in front of it. All import prices, all export prices, all metrics of retail sales. The good news is that we started out the year with a rather strong retail sales number. But if you're looking at the rate of change, maybe something to pay attention to. We talk about funding of banks. What about funding of consumers? Oh, and by the way, the Atlanta Fed wage tracker for the month of March moved from 6.1 to 6.4. So not all the news is good with respect to prices, and yields continue to firm up a little bit on the data points I just gave you. But do keep in mind, we're 3.47 for a 10-year. It settled at 3.45 yesterday, but it settled at 3.39 last Friday. Joe, back to you.
All right. That 2-year loves that 4%. Seems like it's like a magnet. Thanks, Rick. The CPI and PPI inflation were the 2 biggest economic reports of the week. And yesterday we learned core producer prices actually fell in March. It's the first time in 3 years that's been the case. To talk more about how this Fed views this data, how this Fed views this data, Steve Leisman is here, and he joins us with a special guest. Steve.
Yeah, Joe, just before we bring that special guest in, I want to say something a little bit that might be counterintuitive here. This number here on retail is a bad number. It's a decline. It's minus 1%. Technically, though, it's not as bad as it appears because inflation was negative on the top line.
Right.
So you actually, this is one of the few months we're going to add back. So it's bad, it's down, and it's down in a lot of categories. It's down in building materials, it's down in furniture, it's down in motor vehicles. It's definitely a sign of weakness of the consumer, but you want to attenuate it or otherwise limit how bad you think it is because there's an add back technically this month.
Now it's and bad is good, so don't worry about it.
Let's ask somebody about that, Joe. Right. So I just want to add that back in, or take it out, however you want to do it. Joining us now, Austin Goolsbee, the new Chicago Fed president. Austin, thanks for joining us.
Steve, good to see you again.
As an official, I think the most important question to ask you right now is, how are your jokes going over at the FOMC? Are they laughing at you? Or what's going on?
They're laughing with him.
They're laughing at me.
Yes, you? How is that?
Laughing with him.
What's that?
Yeah, they're laughing at me. That's definitely true.
Which is not what we've been doing here. So welcome back to the table here as an official. You recently wrote or gave a speech the other day, Austin, that talks about the Fed not raising too aggressively. And I'm trying to understand more about what you meant about that. Does that mean not doing additional rate hikes from here? Or does that mean not doing a lot more from here? Could you maybe put some detail around that comment?
Yeah, Steve, look, the detail around the comment is at a moment where you got financial stress and you're getting financial tightening from banks trying to conserve capital or trying to strengthen their own side of the ledger, that does the work that normally you're doing in monetary policy. So Fed's got a job to maximize employment and stabilize prices, and Fed's going to do that job. If the credit conditions are doing that job for it, you want to be mindful of it and not be too aggressive. We still got several weeks before the FOMC meeting, so I don't want to specify to the basis point exactly what is that going to mean for what I would be for at the FOMC meeting, because I still want to see the data. But let's just be mindful that we've raised a lot. It takes time for that to work its way through the system. And with this retail sales number, you may be seeing a little bit of that lag. And if you add financial stress on top of that, let's not be too aggressive.
Give me your impression, Austin, of the I guess it should be President Goolsbee now, right?
No, it's Mr. President.
That's
Mr.
exactly
President.
right.
Mr. President.
And
There
for
he is.
Joe, that's Air Dr. President Plenipotentiary.
He's made
All
it
right.
very clear that I need a lot of respect now.
A lot of respect
he did.
now.
He
We are going to treat Austin,
and I'm willing to give it.
We're going to treat
And
President Goolsbee
Joe,
with respect.
we're going to get to in a second the money you still owe me.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right, hold on.
I don't think you can accept it now.
accept that
you
anymore.
can't accept
I
that.
was
Waited.
trying to keep this interview from going off the rails quite so
Okay.
quickly, but let's just keep it focused for a second, President Goolsbee.
Mr. President.
Mr. President. Give me your impression of the two inflation reports this week and your outlook for inflation over the next several months, please.
Look, I think inflation is coming down. We've still got this. Is it a cloud? It's probably not a cloud anymore. But this issue of how much is coming from demand and how much from supply. You've seen the supply chain constraints easing across a lot of sectors. So that's been helping bring inflation down. But you've still got clear stickiness on some parts of the prices. I think when you see the producer prices coming in as big negative numbers and you see these negatives on retail sales, you don't want to overreact to short-run news, but it feels like that's moving in the right direction. The one thing I will highlight, what I'm looking at quite clearly for coming into the next FOMC meeting is what's happening on credit. I'm talking a lot of bankers, businesses, community development organizations. How tight is credit and how much of a credit crunch is there? The one thing that I think we're spending too much time looking at is wage growth as an indicator of prices. There's research out by Chicago Fed researchers reflecting a longer tradition of research that shows wages do not serve as a leading indicator for price inflation. They're a lagging indicator. So when people are looking at what's happening to wages now, that's more reflective of what happened to prices 6 months ago. I think we want to keep our eye on the price series, not on the wage series.
Austin, you said in your, you quoted analysts in your speech saying that the tightening of credit conditions could be worth 25 to 75 basis points of Fed tightening. Do you embrace that? Is that a sort of an arm's length thing?
No,
Or
I didn't.
Go ahead.
I didn't embrace it even in that. I said we don't know. What we need to study is how big is that in a Fed funds equivalent, and that the ranges kind of are all over the place. The median range, I'd call it, from the private analysts is 25 to 75. There are some people, as you know, they're saying 150 and 200. That doesn't seem realistic to me, but it's something. And so if you see credit tightening, you know that does the job of monetary policy. And this moment, sometimes when you're trying to strengthen the financial system and you're looking at either regulatory forcing or the banks themselves trying to strengthen their financial positions in stress, a lot of times that's happening when the economy's in the dumps. And so in a way, your financial stability goals and your monetary policy goals end up fighting each other. But this is not that moment. This is a moment where everything we do to strengthen the financial system to prevent that from snowballing is actually doing the job of monetary policy. So I don't think that they're in conflict at this time.
So, Mr. President, the old expression, perfect becoming the enemy of the good. I mean, I like 2% inflation. That seems like a good number, all right? But really, there gotta be 2%? I mean, it just seems like 3 might be okay long term. Number one, I don't know.
Joe, has he?
Go ahead.
While I've been gone, has he changed his breakfast regimen? What now? Joe's advocating raising the.
I've been on your side the entire time on this. And my next question to you: if it wasn't Mr. President, but if you were Mr. Chairman, Austin Goolsbee, wouldn't you talk everybody else into not doing another 25? I don't think you want to do another 25.
Okay, first of all, let's back up. What did you plot? You owed me money. Your poor forecasting skills lost you money. You owed me dinner.
It was 2.9.
And now
I've
taken.
No,
now I tried to go to get you dinner. You're like, oh, I'm going on vacation, so I don't have to take you out.
Jason Furman said, using the more conventional method, it was above 3%. You squeaked by a tenth of a point, and you never come back here to let me pay you.
Gentlemen,
I did come back, and you went on vacation just to not pay me, and now I can't even receive it. You waited me out, so now I can't take a dinner from you.
And there's been no inflation at Taco Bell.
I have a different question for Austin.
Let's give it up
and
here.
It's a question I've asked a number of folks who are on the Fed, and now that you are on the Fed,
he didn't answer whether he would pause.
Which is, what do you think a politically palatable unemployment rate could or should look like in the United States?
Look, I'm out of the politics business, Andrew. I don't know what a politically palatable.
To the extent that if you're on the Fed and you're thinking about, or forget about politically palatable, what is a economically palatable? What is a palatable unemployment rate?
Like what is maximum employment? Is that what you're asking?
Maybe that is what I'm asking, but what do you think makes sense?
I think it is.
Given the inflation piece you're talking about.
Yeah, it varies depending on what's happening on the supply side. So in the pandemic, inflation soars when the unemployment rate is 6% and above. So at that moment, it's different than now. It's different than in 2019, where we got unemployment down to 3.5%, but there was no inflation. So I don't think you can actually answer what's maximum employment until you merge it in with what's happening with price stability.
Did you say if you were Powell, you wouldn't raise, Austin? Did you answer that?
I didn't say. That's what you said. And
no, I know, but you didn't answer.
I learned long ago, Joe, to never let you put words in my mouth, and that served me well.
If you were in charge, would you try to talk everybody else into pausing if you could?
Look,
right now?
I would. Joe, I'm an old school data dog, and what I would do is spend the next 3 weeks getting out and figuring out how much credit tightening is coming from the financial stress.
Speaking of a data dog,
we got to stop inflation. We got to stop inflation.
How much stock do you put in the staff of the Federal Reserve Board, the 7,000 economists there, and their models, which they run 20,000 times, saying that the baseline forecast now is a mild recession because of potential bank tightening?
I put some stock in that. I put more stock in our Chicago Fed researchers. We got the best researchers of all. But there's no way you can look at current conditions around the world and in the U.S. and not think that some mild recession is definitely on the table as a possibility. I mean, the data show that, and we've raised rates almost 500 basis points in a year. That's historically an indicator of slowing GDP growth. When you get numbers like retail sales and others that are declining, or you look at construction, I think we've got to think about what's the state of growth in the country. Fortunately, the labor market continues to be very strong. And
so how does your reaction function change, Austin? How does the reaction function change? How do you respond to a recession? There are people who have argued to me that your average Fed official actually has a recession built in everything but GDP, by pointing out that you don't get a 1 percentage point increase in the unemployment rate outside of a recession. Does a recession mean you stop hiking? Does it mean you cut?
Well, I mean, let's not start chasing our tail here. It depends. Is this mild recession, if they have it, is that being caused by the raising of interest rates, or is that a recession that's happening because of supply conditions or things that are happening outside?
Austin, I have a question, because whenever the markets get a whiff of the notion that the Fed may pause, that the Fed may actually consider a pivot, asset prices go higher. So to the extent that you care about, or the Fed, does the Fed care about that the markets take it as a good sign and therefore stock prices will rally? Because what we saw yesterday was very interesting. We saw a risk-on rally. So we saw, for instance, the ARK Innovation ETF rally on the back of this notion that maybe the Fed's going to pivot. That sort of works against what the Fed's trying to do.
It's an interesting point. I think that's an interesting point. I've been publicly saying from the time I took the job and before on this program over the years, I'm not a fan of the Fed tying, let's call it, its mandate or the doing of its job to how does the market reacting. Like I say, Congress gave Fed a job, which is maximize employment, stabilize prices. It doesn't say anything in there about make sure that the markets stay happy or make sure nobody loses any money. And so I'm not a fan of paying close attention to what the market response is going to be.
That's a little weird because you do your job through the market, right?
Yeah.
Well, hang on. Let me just call up a chart here, Austin. Well, I mean, you guys said you were going to pivot into raising rates in November of 21, and rates went up, and that was doing your job for you. And right now, if you look at the outlook for rates, Austin, they don't believe you. They think you're going to cut, and cut pretty deeply by the end of this year. And so, in a sense, the market is not doing its job for you. So maybe you shouldn't be pandering to markets, but certainly there's some, what's the right word, symbiosis that's necessary here that you're not getting.
Austin, in the past, the Fed has tried to use the wealth effect to bolster balance sheets and make things better and have stock market go. In seriously scary times, it stayed at zero to bolster the wealth effect to help. So that's why we had a Fed put for so long. You really don't think we've ever done that to try to make things better?
I'm not going to get in an argument about history. I'm going to just say, at this moment, when I say we need to look at what the market is doing for us in monetary policy, I'm talking about credit conditions on the ground for in the real economy, regular businesses. Yeah. If the stock market reacts, so be it. But that's not what I think that the Fed's primary instrument should be right now. It should not be using the wealth effect of stock market wealth to try to steer the economy. I think right now this credit condition is the.
Plus, the Fed uses the pandemic as an excuse for staying at zero. Why can't I use that as an excuse for not paying off? You weren't back here. There was a pandemic. So how are we supposed to go to dinner or lunch when there was a right? Because there was a pandemic. Did you forget there was a pandemic?
You went on vacation. All I know, I showed up, you went on vacation, and you waited me out, Joe. You waited me out, and now I'm not allowed to pay. Now I have to pay for my own dinner, and I'm not paying to go to dinner with you.
I'm going to pull the tapes. I'm going to settle this once and for all. We don't have the kind of time to deal with this anymore. Like, Austin, we got a lot of things to ask you about, so I got to settle this. I want Joe to be happy. I want you to be happy. I just want to settle this thing. Thank you for joining us, President Goolsbee, Austin, whatever it is. We'll see you again soon.
Okay, coming up on the other side of this, Jim Cramer's first take on the big bank earnings we're just hearing about in the markets ahead of this Friday morning's opening bell. Got that after this.